Brooks Buser says, if you sense a call to missions, begin living out that call today, right where you are.
If you don't love the local church, don't go into missions, because that's what missions is. We are about seeing churches, these little outposts of heaven planted around the globe.
Jesus never promised his followers an easy path. In fact, he told his disciples that the world would hate them. He sent them out as sheep among wolves. Jesus' words came true in the life of the apostles, and they're still coming true today in the lives of his followers around the world. Join host Todd Nettleton as we hear their inspiring stories and learn how we can help. Right now on the Voice of the Martyrs Radio Network.
Welcome again to the Voice of the Martyrs Radio. My name is Todd Nettleton. We are in our studio today in Bartlesville, Oklahoma with Brooks Buser. He is the president of Radius International. Before that, he was a missionary in Papua New Guinea with New Tribes Mission. And before that, he was an MK in Papua New Guinea, which is something we share in common. I, too, spent part of my growing up years in Papua New Guinea. Brooks, welcome to the Voice of the Martyrs Radio.
Thank you, brother. Very glad to be here.
Well, we are glad to have you. When you went as a missionary to Papua New Guinea, how much of a leg up was it that you had been there as an MK?
It was significantly different because, as a kid, you just have no responsibilities. And then going back as an adult, married, I had a son. It was still, where we moved in, and I'm sure we'll talk about that, to the people group was completely different than where I was raised. But still, to get to know the country and to have a familiarity with the capital, the national language, that was a huge leg up. Very, very helpful.
Brooks, you guys, and I watched a film. There's a film on YouTube. By the way, if you're listening, we'll give you a link in the show notes. It's a 30-minute film that tells the story of Brooks and his family going to the Yembi people, talks about the translation of the Bible. What were some of the things you had to say? We want to be among you. We want to be a part of your people. And I know one of them involved a boar hunt. but what were some of the other things to say, hey, this is what we have to do to be accepted. This is what we have to do to fit in.
When we moved in initially, it was just the men because we didn't have houses. And so we wanted our wives to come in where at least they were partially built. They had like some roof over their head, that kind of thing. So the men moved in, we started building, and they immediately realized, okay, because everybody in YembiYembi knows each other by how they're related to each other. And so we couldn't be these long-term outsiders. To call somebody by their name in YembiYembi is offensive. You have to call each other by how you're related. And so the second cousin, third cousin, we put up a huge chart that covered an entire wall. And then all three of the missionary men, we got adopted into these clans, and we started making kind of just this family tree. Who are we related to, and how do we call them, and that kind of thing. And so it took us almost a year and a half for everybody on the team to know, here's how I'm related to about 1,500 people, 1,500 YembiYembis. That was a big challenge.
Is that just a memorization exercise? Like you just kind of have to memorize the
Pretty
chart?
much. You have these confidants initially where I was like, okay, if I could get with this guy and I'd be walking up to somebody, he'd give me the cheat sheet. Hey, that's your aunt's, or hey, that's your aunt on your mother's side, or that's your second cousin, or whatever it was. There would be people like that, but it was rote memorization because you're learning your relationships. Think about going to a family reunion as a kid and you've got 50 relatives. Well, now you got 1,500, and you got to know so that you don't offend, and you've got all of these different protocols. When a wedding happens, when somebody dies, you have a responsibility as a member of that community. And so we were adopted into these clans. There's 4 clans: Ostrich Clan, Eagle Clan, Black Cockatoos, and the Toucans. We're all adopted into these 4 clans, and we represent these clans, so to speak, among the missionary team. There was that, and then what you referred to as hunting wild boar, and then the one that my wife likes. She likes it the most now, but we had to get remarried because they found out how we were married in the United States, and they said, you think you're married, you're not really married. We're going to remarry you.
So all of that, in order to be accepted, in order to be part of the tribe, in order to share the gospel, were there times where you thought, this is too much, like the process is too long, I don't want to go through I don't want to memorize 1,500 people and how they're all related? Was there ever some frustration in that of, Lord, we just want to tell them about Jesus?
Yeah, I think this happens in missions the world over. Missionary work is front-loaded in pain and frustration. The payoff all comes at the back end, but the punch, the real difficulty comes at the front end. And so we had gotten good training to where we knew the front end is going to be really tough, and to just press and keep pressing. Memorizing the names was tough. The relationships were tough. A couple of the other things were like wild and weird, but the learning of the language, that's the hard stuff. That's the grueling day-to-day regular, and you have to kind of set these little benchmarks and go, okay, when I make it here, mini celebration. When I make it here, and when I can tell a short story, mini celebration. There's all these things, and you got to keep your head up, because you know that you're going to get through this someday if you keep on, if you stay faithful. That's the big thing.
So how long of a process was it until you actually got to talk about Jesus and the plan of salvation and the fact that we're all sinners? How long of a process was that?
Radius teaches this. This is a school that I'm at. You got to judge between market fluency, which is being able to talk about the weather, being able to talk about coconuts and canoes and that kind of stuff, and worldview fluency. We were way ahead of the curve. And I mean, it took us 9 years to finish the Bible translation, which is really, really fast. But you think about 9 years and you go, wow, that took a ton of time. The hardest thing in the missionary task is to learn another language, to be fluent. But if you can immerse yourself, and you know you're not just immersing yourself with no plan, but you've got a plan and you're working your way up to that. But you got to be out. You got to be on the trails. You got to be hunting pigs. You got to be going to these other places, sleeping in their houses, getting the mosquito bites, living by the fire, all of these things so that you can speak with fluency and you can speak with credibility. You've been to the places that they talk about. That's a huge gift to missionaries.
So one of the things that Radius International is doing now is teaching missionaries, future missionaries, and part of that is language. So what is different about what you teach about learning language than I download Babbel on my phone and do that, or what maybe some other mission groups are saying about language acquisition?
If we're going to train an English speaker, we're going to train them down in Mexico. We're not going to train them in the U.S. And so they get
Interesting.
They get class training from 8 to 12. They're not allowed to go north for the 9 months that they're with us. They're fully immersed in that culture.
So in the process of the training, you learn Spanish.
Totally. Yeah.
Because you're immersed in that. You're training them to learn and showing them the methodology to learn Spanish. But then they go to China and learn Mandarin, or they go...
One of the misnomers in language study is that, well, if I fill my head with Spanish, it'll be so much harder to learn Arabic. It's the actual opposite. The more languages you know, the next one is easier. And so if somebody learns Spanish, for them to learn Urdu or Hindi or whatever the language they're going to, it's that much easier. And so because you're stretching those muscles for the first time that have never been stretched. And again, we're not a sending agency. We're a training school, but the sending agencies come down and recruit from our school, and our graduates tend to do really well overseas because of their time down in Mexico.
I'm not sure I've heard of that kind of system. Like you want to learn this, but you're going to learn this first because it'll help you learn that later.
Yeah.
We're talking this week on Voice of the Martyrs Radio with Brooks Buser. He is the president of Radius International. Brooks, we talked about language school. So you have 2 in English, you have 2 in Mandarin.
Yeah.
Now, what second language are the Mandarin speakers learning?
Bahasa. So most of the schools are next to. So one of them's in Bahasa, and then one of them bounces. So the school number 1 is in Taichung, Taiwan. So that's for all of the Mandarin speakers that don't come from China. If they come from China, that's a school that we bounce around to stay ahead of the Chinese government. So I'm not at liberty to say where that school's at.
An unknown location.
There you go. But we found that our graduates, and I mean, there's this idea out there, well, they're Chinese, and so they'll obviously learn languages faster. Well, that's not true. Only trained people learn languages. We found that a lot of the Chinese missionaries were going overseas to these people groups, and they were training people how to learn Mandarin just so they could communicate with them because they didn't know how to break down a language. But if you train our brothers and sisters from other countries, our next school coming is in India, that'll all be in Hindi, you give those guys training to go to some of these places where your and my passport can't get into, that's a powerful tool. But again, training's the key. If they're going to stand a chance of getting in and staying, learning to full fluency of language, that's going to have to come through someone giving them some tools.
How important is the immersion part of that? Like you don't have anybody to speak English to, and so you have to figure it out because everyone around you is speaking this language.
Yeah. Now, the immersion is the key to it, because if you're getting it in through regular practices, so we're going to teach them this system, and the system is to start off with, just go on regular routine things that your people do, whether they go to the fruit market, whether they ride mopeds, whether the men sit around and they tell stories for 5 hours at night until 2 o'clock in the morning. Brother and sister, you might not be a night person. You just became a night person. For the sake of God's glory, you're going to become what your people are. You're going to start dressing like them. I used to do language evaluations for missionaries in Southeast Asia, and your best missionaries smell like the local people, because the sweat that comes out of your pores really is dictated by your diet. And so the missionaries that are doing the best have started to change their appetites based on the local culture. You're not just going after the language, you're going after the culture too, so that you knock down every barrier possible. You can never knock down your skin color. You can never knock down your background, but you can knock down some of these significant barriers to the gospel by becoming like your people. There's kind of a model there in Jesus Christ, and everything but sin, and he became like us. It's amazing to think about. Jesus didn't come in as a 32-year-old. He could have. He could have come as a 20-year-old. He comes as a baby. He learns the weather patterns of the Jewish people. He learns that when the sun rises in a particular way, when the color is this way, and how the sea works, and he knows the history of the Jewish people, and he can speak to these things. That's what good missionaries do. We're not little Jesuses running around, but we are called to be like the people for the sake of the gospel.
Brooks, you translated the Bible. You start to share the gospel. You have people in the tribe who are coming to faith. Quickly, there was persecution.
Yeah.
And actually, you said in our chapel service this morning, it was one of the best things that could have happened to the Yembi church was the fact that there was persecution, and it happened right away. Tell me what that persecution looked like first, and then why do you say it was a good thing?
Yeah, so it looked like as someone would understand the gospel, and what our guys like to characterize as the gospel is they heard the talk of the bridge man. That's what they called the Christ figure, the one who is the bridge from Satan's side to God's side. They accepted the path of the bridge man. And as they started to go down this path, what you do implicitly, and this is what you say at a baptism, is I turn my back on the ancestor paths and I accept the path of the bridge man.
Wow.
That's a big deal in a culture where everybody knows each other, everybody's tight-knit. You hear these things, and I know you hear these things, Todd, where I was born a Muslim, I was born a Buddhist, I was born a Roman Catholic, whatever you want to say. That's not true. You were born into a particular worldview, but to accept the path of the bridge man implicitly says, I turn my back on other paths. And so our families that started believing this, they were ostracized to some degree. The early Christians, they had their houses cut down, their gardens were all sorts of hammered. They weren't getting the support from the system.
What was their fear, or what was their anger towards the new believers?
So in a tight-knit, small-scale oral society like that, everybody relies on each other. And to make sure that there is unity and harmony in the community is so big. And when someone sticks their head up and says, I'm different, I'm going a different way, all of a sudden community and harmony is starting to show some cracks and some fissures. And then now they're saying, hey, I don't fear the dark anymore. Our women, the Christian women, started to live longer because the men decided that only God controls game. So men in the old system don't give anything that you kill to your pregnant wife because you'll lose your hunting power. Well, now the Christians come along and say, no, that's not true. Only God controls when we get game or whether we don't. So I'm feeding my pregnant wife because she's obviously, and now they start.
What a concept.
Oh, I know. And it's these simple things that you couldn't break through without the gospel. You couldn't just say, no, you have to feed your women. No man is going to give his wife red meat because they're going to lose their hunting power. They know this. But only the gospel has the key to unlock these truths. And now their children don't fear the dark. When someone has died in YembiYembi for about a month, nobody goes out of their house for about a month just because they're scared the spirit of this person is going to go around. It's going to inflict pain on anybody. Wow. And now the little kids of the Christian parents are no longer fearing the dark. This is causing seismic ripples in the community. That's what's causing a lot of this. And so in the daylight, man, they're hammering the Christians, and the Christians are holding strong, and it's attracting more and more people to it. It's no mystery why the early church in the book of Acts grew at such a rate. I don't wish persecution on anyone, but man, it has this sifting effect to where you're all in or you're all out. And that's a wonderful thing in Christianity.
And as you say, the people around are watching this, and they see the people who are all in. And it does. It draws very clear lines about which side you're on.
Yeah. Marriages start to get stronger. Men stop beating their wives. It's not 100% immediate. None of this stuff happens overnight. Life starts to change. You're putting on different lenses over your eyes. And these are Christian lenses. They see the world differently. And that's an amazing thing.
How did the church grow? And how did you, as an outsider, say, we're not trying to build a church like my church back in San Diego. We're trying to build a YembiYembi church that is true to this culture, but honors Jesus and follows the Bible. What was that process like?
So the process was we would teach a book of the Bible. We wanted to go through a book. We were keenly aware that everything we did in the early church was kind of setting up the model for how it would be replicated. Mm-hmm. There's this strong statement that what you win them with, you win them to. So the model you win them with to the gospel and to growth in Christianity, you win them to that, and they're going to model that down the road. And so we wanted our teachers to see, okay, we go book by book. And so we would concentrate on translating books of the Bible, and we would teach, and sometimes because we were trying to get translation done as fast as possible, well, Luke was going to be about 17 lessons, but it's going to turn into 27 just because I don't have Acts done yet. And so you're
but we're working as fast as we can.
Exactly. And then we're having late night get-togethers, men's and women's, where we get together and we go over the lesson, and then we started doing studies on later on when we got into the pastoral epistles, elder classes, deacon classes, but they were always open to anyone who wanted to come, but there was heavy scripture memorization involved. If you're going to graduate from this class, you're going to have to memorize 5 verses a week, and this class is going to be 12 weeks long. And so you're just getting Bible into their system any way you can possibly get Bible in. And that was our model. So from the day that we had believers, we stayed 8 more years to see that church brought to true strength and maturity to where it had its own elders, its own deacons, and now sent out its own missionaries last year. That was the process, and it took a while.
It does take a while. We're talking this week on Voice of the Martyrs Radio with Brooks Buser. He is the president of Radius International. Before that, a missionary in Papua New Guinea with New Tribes Mission, now Ethnos 360. Brooks, you're involved in training missionaries. I'm interested if there are some red flags. Like if you see something in a young missionary couple, say, or just a young single missionary, are there some things that you see and go, whoa, this is going to be a stumbling block for you in terms of long-term third culture success? And maybe on the other side, are there some things that you see and you're like, that's such a great quality to take with you to the mission field?
I mean, they kind of mirror each other. So the things that make me nervous are, number one, people that have gone on a ton of short-term trips and they're excited about food, stamps in their passport, and dressing like people overseas. Like that. It's this whole zeal.
That wears off before the 8 years are up.
Oh, it wears off in about 2 months. Like it does not hold you in good stead. Excitable people have found their way into missions, and serious people have tended to push away from missions. And that's a travesty in the English-speaking world, because some of our seminary graduates, some of our men who should be pastoring overseas have been pulled into ministry domestically because they thought through these things, and it's the excitable people, is how J.C. Ryle would say it. Those people have ended up in missions. That makes me nervous. Probably the biggest thing, though, hands down, is people who aren't rooted in their local church before they go into missions, going overseas and kind of modeling that. Again, what you win them with, you win them to. Mm-hmm. If you don't love the local church, don't go into missions, because that's what missions is. We are about seeing churches, these little outposts of heaven planted around the globe among every ethne. That's the key. And so young people who, and I love both these guys, they hear a John Piper, they hear a David Platt sermon, and they go, I want to go into missions.
Yep.
Well, that's great, but let's see, are you faithful in your local church first? Have you actually been a servant to the local church? Do you appreciate the gray hairs and the toddlers? Do you appreciate the sermons? Can you work your way into that church to where you know and love that local body before you go plant another body? That's probably my biggest fear. The converse of that is people who know their church, who love their church, and who have been trained well, do really well in missions typically. People who have read good biographies. Biography puts steel in your spine like almost nothing else. To read To the Golden Shore, to read the autobiography of John Payton, to read Beauty for Ashes, the story of Amy Carmichael. all of Elizabeth Elliot's Chance to Die. There are some incredible works out there, and you got to get young people to where if you're serious about missions, know what came before you. That will hold you in good stead in the dark hours especially.
And that is a special part of my heritage. My dad read some of those books to my brother and I. I think Lords of the Earth was one of my favorites, and then going to the island of New Guinea and sort of following in the footsteps of Stanley Dale. I just so echo that, not only for you if you're thinking about missions, but you as a parent, plant those seeds early in your children's life. They are going to have heroes. They might as well be missionary heroes, or at least some of them need to be missionary heroes. So I would encourage you along that line as well. Brooks, as we finish up, we always want to encourage people to pray. My church sends missionaries. Your church sends missionaries. Hopefully all of our listeners are involved in a local church that sends out missionaries. How do we pray for them? And I think especially in those early years, as they're learning the language, as they're getting past the culture shock, what are some really nitty-gritty specific ways to pray as we are sending our missionaries and as they're getting established and situated on the field?
Yeah, if we're talking about missionaries that are going long-term to see churches planted, I think you touched on it briefly, to pray that they would be faithful. We're not looking for immediate results. I think the good churches, that's code for churches that send well, they're not looking for immediate fruit. Those make really great prayer letters, but they're not necessarily the things that are going to be the ultimate metrics. We're praying for faithfulness. And as we pray that they catch that first case of malaria, they catch dengue fever, they endure the police going house to house and looking for people, that they would stay faithful, that the Lord would keep their hearts calm, that he would keep them in the race long term, to pray for that mentality, because that's a rare thing these days, to think, you know what, I'm here for the long run, and if the Lord pulls me out, so be it. But if the Lord allows me to stay, God, would you keep me faithful in language study? Would you keep me faithful even as my body is not really liking the humidity levels that I'm dealing with here, and the food tends to do some funny things to my belly? Just would you keep me faithful? Good churches check up on them. They check up on them with their timesheets, how they're doing with language, how they're doing with their marriage, how their kids are growing, that their kids aren't becoming little Papua New Guineans. They still got to come back to the United States, and they got to segue between the two worlds. And so good churches are going to pray for that, but they're also going to intentionally get involved in those things.
Brooks, how do people connect with Radius? I assume you have a website. How do people connect?
RadiusInternational.org. Go to that website. And then the two biggest ways to connect is, number one, come for a visit day. We have visit days in November and February where we bring you right across the border. We will get you there. We'll look after you. And then you'll be there for 2 days to see how we train, what we do. Those are called Radius Days on the website. If you go to RadiusInternational.org and you pull down interactions, it'll have Radius Days. And then if you can't make it down to Mexico, or you can't come for those, come visit us at the Missionary Conference. We will have a large presence there. There will be a dedicated evening event just for those that are looking at going to unreached language groups. It'll be a Radius-sponsored event. We'd love to see you there, October 16th to 18th, Jacksonville, Florida.
Brooks Buser has been our guest this week. He is the president of Radius International. Brooks, it's awesome. I love to talk to somebody who used to live in Papua New Guinea. That's just fun. Thanks for being with us on Voice of the Martyrs Radio.
Thank you, Todd. Been a privilege.
As always, I hope that you'll connect with us online. Our website is vomradio.net. We'll give you links in the show notes this week to all the things that Brooks has been talking about. We'll also give you a link to a video about Brooks and his family's work in Papua New Guinea. It is a great telling of the story of him going and planting the seeds of the gospel, translating the Bible. All of that is on our website, vomradio.net. Next month is pretty special here at Voice of the Martyrs Radio. We will be celebrating 10 years of weekly broadcasts and podcasts, and I would love for you to join in that celebration by letting us know how God has used the program in your life. You can just send me an email with your story. The address is radio@vom.org. Again, that's radio@vom, like Voice of the Martyrs.org. We're going to be celebrating together on the air in the month of September. Next week, we're going to hear about some of the challenges believers in Jesus face in South Asia. but we will also hear how the church is being built, how the gospel is being preached, despite opposition, despite those who are working against the church. I hope you'll be back for that conversation. I know it's going to encourage you. We'll see you next week right here on the Voice of the Martyrs Radio Network.